For the past few years, the Franco-German engine has apparently been out of order. Here at TLDR EU, we've made multiple videos about the wobbly relationship between French President Emmanuel Macron and former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. But now, things seem to be on the up. Since Germany's new Chancellor Friedrich Merz came to power in early May, relations have improved significantly, with the two leaders agreeing on a new Franco-German push for Europe, and publishing a joint opinion piece in the Financial Times last month insisting that Germany and France stand united and strong. Their bromance has even earned its own questionable portmanteau in the international press: Merz-Macron. So, in this video, we'll have a look at the prior tensions between France and Germany, and why the relationship is now improving. If you're a fan of the channel, did you know we also run TLDR Global, our channel where we run down the biggest news stories from around the world, including border tensions in Asia or wars in Africa, to the economic issues facing the US, and even why this South American leader is so unpopular. Check out the news from all over the world and subscribe today by searching for TLDR Global. Under Macron and Scholz, Franco-German relations hit a recent low. This was mainly because Macron and Scholz had different approaches to many key issues, from debt to energy. Their most obvious public disagreements, however, were Ukraine-related. Macron and Scholz repeatedly clashed over Germany's refusal to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine, which could conduct precision strikes deep inside Russia, as well as over the issue of deploying European troops. While France had sent its long-range Scalp missile to Ukraine in 2023, Scholz refused to send Germany's Taurus missiles due to concerns over potential escalation. Plus, it would likely require German troops in Ukraine to operate them. The position of Scholz's government caused some frustration in Kiev, but it was also ridiculed by Macron, who said at a press conference in February 2024, many of those saying never today are the same people who said never tanks, never planes 2 years ago. At this same conference, Macron also refused to rule out sending Western troops to Ukraine, which clearly annoyed Scholz, who almost immediately took to X to say, "It's clear there will be no ground troops from European countries or NATO." This exposed a fundamental difference in Macron and Scholz's approaches to foreign policy. While Macron was pursuing strategic ambiguity, i.e. being deliberately evasive about potential actions like sending troops to Ukraine in order to deter Russia without making explicit commitments, Scholz was far more clear and cautious in his approach, and didn't like Macron's off-the-cuff idea floating. Discussions over funding Ukraine also exposed another fracture in the Franco-German relationship: debt. For context, Macron has repeatedly championed the idea of European debt sharing, calling for joint European defence bonds, or Eurobonds, to fund increases in defence spending and support to Ukraine. However, Germany has always been sceptical of debt sharing at the EU level, a tradition Scholz continued. While Merz is also wary of debt sharing, having recently ruled out joint debt at the EU level for, quote, permanent crises, his recent decision to lift Germany's constitutional debt brake and his approval of the Commission's Rearm Europe programme, which involves €150 billion of joint borrowing, suggests he might be more open to debt sharing where deemed necessary. Finally, energy was also a big source of disagreement between Macron and Scholz. For years, Germany, along with Austria, Portugal, Denmark and the Netherlands, had opposed classifying nuclear power as sustainable at the EU level, meaning it wasn't treated on par with renewables in EU legislation. This ideological disagreement over nuclear was reflected in the two countries' energy mixes. France gets up to 70% of its electricity from nuclear energy, the highest share in the world, while Germany has been phasing out its nuclear power plants and generated roughly 60% of its energy via renewables in 2024. However, in May this year, Merz, who criticised Scholz's decision to close down Germany's nuclear reactors in 2023, signalled that Germany will no longer block French efforts to ensure nuclear power is treated on par with renewable energy in EU legislation. Merz did this partly to clear up the energy dispute and reset Franco-German relations, but probably also to pave the way to push for a nuclear weapons sharing agreement with France, which Merz is keen on. So, as you've probably guessed, Merz and Macron's alignment is the most obvious reason for the improvement in Franco-German relations. As we've already covered, Merz and Macron are far more strategically and ideologically aligned than Macron and Scholz. Merz, like Macron, believes in boosting European industry. Both leaders are pro-business and pro-deregulation, having this week agreed on a drastically watered-down version of the EU supply chain oversight law. And in terms of leadership style, both are similarly happy to make sharp comments and suggestions publicly, even if unpopular. In May, Merz also affirmed his commitment to strategic ambiguity, saying that Germany would stop publishing full details of military aid to Ukraine, leading to some speculation that Germany may now be quietly supplying Taurus missiles. France and Germany are now also more reliant on debt and energy, as we explained earlier. But there's also at least two other reasons for this rapprochement that we'll explain now. First, the revival of the Franco-German engine is also partly due to US President Donald Trump. Trump and US Vice President J.D. Vance's comments about Europe and wavering commitment to NATO's Article 5 Mutual Defence Clause have lent new urgency to the EU's defence efforts, which Macron and Merz are leading. In his election victory speech, Merz said the EU needs to achieve independence from the USA and has pledged to do whatever it takes on defence. Merz has also echoed Macron's calls for European strategic autonomy, with the two leaders announcing plans in May to establish a joint Franco-German Defence and Security Council to improve operational coordination, and Merz now focusing heavily on Germany's rearmament. Trump's return has apparently galvanised pro-EU sentiment in several member states, and given new impetus to a reset of France-Germany relations. And second, we might also argue that some of Europe's prospective three-country alliances, like the Weimar Triangle of France, Germany and Poland, which commentators were talking up as a potential replacement for the engine of Europe when France and Germany weren't getting on, haven't really worked out. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is dealing with a setback after the Polish presidential election was won by the opposition Law and Justice Party. And thinking about the other big European powers, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez recently annoyed NATO allies by refusing to agree to their new 5% defence spending target. And Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is seen as too close to the Trump administration to lead on pan-European defence. Ultimately, it's very early in Merz's tenure, and there remain sources of disagreement between France and Germany, most notably debt sharing. While they've started off on the right foot, the relationship's longevity will also depend on how the France and German domestic political situations develop in the coming months and years. The next issue of our magazine, Too Long, is about to publish, and this time it's all about the end of the American order. In that section, we unpack everything from the collapse of the democratic norms in the US to the decline in American soft power, and if the US can maintain its dominance in energy and technology. We also discuss the people who could pick up the reins from the US, like if China, Europe, or even a new multipolar order could replace America. This magazine is our longest ever, coming in at 76 pages, all full of our best journalism as well as thought-through analysis. That goes beyond the US too, with more than half of the magazine dedicated to other topics, from Germany's new focus on military might, the offshoring of migrants around the world, how Nigel Farage could become Britain's next Prime Minister, or our section where we ask a handful of experts what's really driving anti-establishment sentiment around the world. You can pre-order a copy of Too Long from our website right now, or you can subscribe to make sure you never miss an issue going forward. And if you do, you'll also get 20% off every copy as long as you're subscribed. Plus, just this week, if you use code AmericanOrder, you'll get an additional 20% off any subscription, bringing the price down to as little as £6.40. So pre-order your copy now to get yourself all of that extra content and support all the journalism that we do at TLDR every day.